so that we don't disturb artifacts.
So tell me about some of the amazing things you found.
Well, we've found over 1 million artifacts in this project, but there are certain things that really do stand out.
One of those things that stands out is a lead luggage tag with its destination stamped on it, Jamestown. This tag made the long journey from England to the New World on a wooden ship, then was discarded into the bottom of a well. After its rediscovery, 400 years later, it would again be making a long trip, this time into space. To help celebrate the 400th anniversary of Jamestown, this lowly luggage tag was placed aboard the space shuttle Atlantis, where it traveled nearly 6 million miles around the Earth. After the space flight was over, the tag was returned to Jamestown, where it went back on display in the Jamestown Archaearium with other artifacts from the old fort.
I think it really highlights the sort of age-old exploration process that in 1607, you had to get the vehicles, you had to raise the money, you had to get the political things in order, the charter to come to Virginia, and dress appropriately with armor and closed helmets, and because it was an alien environment, you had to put some kind of it is almost like a space station, here, or an outpost to begin to explore an unknown environment in Virginia,
And NASA's continuing to do that.
Right, and here's the colonization of the moon, and what are the problems? Well, you got to get there, you got to have the right vehicles. What do you take with you? How do you survive in this alien environment? You put an artificial surface around you, and you dress appropriately. So it's really an age-old thing, this whole psychological need to explore, spiritual need to explore, I think, is still today just as it was at the time of Jamestown.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about this correlation between the early explorers, yourself, your explorer, and then the future explorers.
Well, I'm kind of an explorer of explorers, the original explorers. I mean, we're trying to figure out what it was like to explore and to discover, and our project's called Jamestown Rediscovery. We're not discovering Jamestown, we're rediscovering it. And a good example is this space here, this was used as a laboratory to study the minerals and the iron ore of this new land, to see if it could be profitable to come here. And so I think that's very similar to what I've read about explorations, especially on Mars. They send out vehicles and they do drilling and they look at the materials, and that's what was going on here. And so this space was where I'm sure the people that you heard of before, Captain John Smith walking around here. Maybe Pocahontas checking out the blacksmith shop.
That is so cool. What an amazing job you have.
Well, that's the payoff is to feel the place, to walk the places, to be in the places where these historical events happened. So then the events take on much more meaning than if you just read them in a textbook.
Earlier, Dr. Kelso mentioned the similarities between the 1607 Jamestown explorers and NASA's future space explorers. What about all the explorers in between? Guys like Daniel Boone, Neil Armstrong come to mind, as well as many countless others who have helped broaden our knowledge through exploration. Perhaps two of the most famous names in American exploration history are Lewis and Clark. You ever heard of them? They blazed a trail through the American West, mapping out their path as they went. So what do you think? Did NASA have anything to do with the Lewis and Clark expedition? Well, not the original trip, but NASA is helping out now. Johnny Alonso will tell you all about it.
All right, so we've seen a lot today how NASA's helping archaeologists and paleontologists through remote sensing. These remote sensing devices have helped us unearth some really cool findings in places like Cambodia, Central America, and the American Southwest. And they've also helped along one of the most famous trails in American history, the Lewis and Clark Trail. To find out how NASA helped map this 200-year-old trail, I rolled up to Fort Manda in North Dakota, to where Lewis and Clark spent their first winter. Before we get into NASA's involvement, let's go back a few hundred years at the beginning of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Back in 1804, when the expedition began, we knew almost nothing about what was to the west of St. Louis. So President Thomas Jefferson commissioned Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to lead an expedition west to find the first all-water route to the Pacific Ocean. This was an epic journey, taking several years and 3,700 miles to complete. During this trip, they collected samples of plants and animals, met many of the different Indian tribes of the West, and brought back detailed data about the route that they had taken. But even though they brought back some pretty good maps and data, they still weren't 100% accurate. That's because most of these journals weren't written right away, or they were written after a hard day's travel. And many of the entries contained geographical inaccuracies. So, this is where NASA comes in. Researchers from NASA Stennis Space Center took the maps of Lewis and Clark and combined them with high-resolution images taken from satellites and aircraft. They created maps with a 360-degree view of an area where the explorers traveled. From that view, archaeologists could follow the trails as if they were flying over the actual landscape in real time and in any direction or angle they chose. Researchers pored over these maps looking for telltale signs of human disturbances unique to the Lewis and Clark expedition. With this technique, archaeologists were able to narrow down some of the possible sites from many miles to a few acres. This information is helping to find Lewis and Clark artifacts that provide a clearer understanding of the expedition and what the lives of those early explorers had been like. And don't forget, NASA has a new generation of explorers too, that'll soon be going back to the moon and on to Mars. So in the future, when we talk about great explorers, there's no doubt that NASA's astronauts will be on the list. It's amazing, isn't it? Just when you thought you knew everything about NASA, we throw something else at you. So as you can see, NASA's not only trying to help shape our future, it's also making the past clearer. But that's it for this episode. For Jennifer Pulley, I'm Johnny Alonso. I'll catch you next time on NASA 360. By dinosaur. That's right, it was still in. These remote sensing devices have helped us on. Two.
Why? Well, APVA lead archaeologist Dr. Bill Kelso believed he thought.
To find out how NASA helped. Two. That's right, a mummified hadrosaur named Dakota.
Let's head out to North Dakota. Johnny Alonso is learning how NASA technology was used to unearth some really cool, really unique guys like Daniel Boone and Neil Armstrong may come to mind, as well as many countless It's Dr.
I rolled out to Fort Mandan, North Dakota. Damn, that was it. That was it. I'll say it right this time.